everybody. I was going to suggest that I can't offer you a warm welcome because of the cold evening air, but nevertheless I shall do so. A very warm welcome to you all to the Free Church this evening for our special charity concert in aid of the Dennis Scott unit at Edgware Hospital. I'm going to talk more about that unit in a moment, but first of all I'd like to introduce our two artists this evening. Catherine Bamber, violin, was born and educated in Essex. She took up the violin at the age of 8 and later studied with Howard Davis and Yossi Zivoni. On leaving school, she read classics at Cambridge University, Churchill College, whilst she continued her musical studies and performing. It was during her time at university that Catherine first discovered her passion for teaching music, and she's made that her career ever since. She was Director of Music at the Henrietta Barnett School for 17 years, and she now holds the same position at the Dame Alice Owen School in Potters Bar. Catherine is still active as a chamber musician, both in string quartets and recently in the Hayward Piano Trio. And there was also a time when she played in an array of amateur orchestras in and around London, including as leader of the Essex Chamber Orchestra and the Covent Garden Chamber Orchestra. And in more recent years, she has narrowed this down to just the one orchestra, the Islington-based Haydn Chamber Orchestra. That's Catherine Bamber, and then David Trafford, our pianist, who was born and brought up in Muswell Hill, and at the age of 16 won an Associated Board scholarship to study at the Royal College of Music. There he studied with Dennis Matthews, Cyril Smith and Stephen Savage, among others, and was awarded an exchange scholarship to study at the Eastman School in Rochester, New York in 1972. He specialised in chamber music and accompaniment and won prizes in London and abroad, as well as giving solo recitals. David decided against a career in music and trained for Christian ministry and worked in 3 churches in North London and later as a pastoral consultant in the United Reformed Church. He's given many solo and chamber music recitals, played concertos and worked with choirs in and around London. Now, tonight's concert, as I intimated, is a charity concert in aid of the Dennis Scott unit at Edgware Hospital, which consists of 3 acute adult mental health wards, all 3 of them mixed. There are over 60 patients in total at any one time, and Mark Trafford was a patient there on more than one occasion, although we as a church here at the Free Church don't have anyone associated with us here at the Free Church in any of the wards at the moment. A few years ago, we raised £10,000 for outside exercise equipment, which you will see at the front of the wards if you visit them. As a church, we provide Easter eggs at Easter for everyone, patients and staff, strawberries and cream on Wimbledon finals weekend, and a package of presents and sweets at Christmas. The presents aimed at being helpful and practical, as well as being a treat. This concert tonight, as well as similar concerts held here in the past, have raised all the money we have needed to provide these gifts. Now, I hope you noticed you didn't pay when you came in, but I guess you'll be asked to pay when you leave. There will be donation dishes. There will also be a credit card payment machine if you prefer to donate by credit card. And there will also be these little code things. I think they're called QR codes. Anyway, if you use your mobile phone to scan the QR code, it'll take you to the website where you will also be able, if you choose, to contribute via this means. So you all came in free, but you'll have one of 3 means to pay as you leave. So please put your hands together for Catherine Bamber and David Trafford as they begin tonight's concert. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming this evening. It's really, really lovely, speaking on a personal level, to be back in what was my community for many, many years. And it's very nice to see people who, lots of familiar faces that make me remember very fondly the time spent in the suburb at Henrietta Barnet. We're going to start this evening with a piece by Tartini. So Tartini was a violinist composer of the 17th, 18th century, and he was one of the leaders in developing violin technique. One of the things he said about composing was that music has to express something, it must be expressive. That's not necessarily always what we think of in such a strong way when we think of music from the Baroque period, but that was very strongly his idea. This sonata is entitled Didone Abbandonata, and it's about Dido, the Carthaginian queen of the Aeneid by Virgil, and she was a character who captured many people's imagination over centuries, and you find her depicted in Renaissance art and art of the 17th, 18th centuries. So Dido was abandoned by Aeneas. Aeneas was a hero who was destined to found Rome, and he had bumped into Dido on his travels, who was queen in North Africa, and they had had a lovely time together. But then he had to leave, he couldn't stay, he had a destiny to go elsewhere. And she, being a woman of enormous powers, of enormous achievements, but also of enormous passions, was left abandoned and she eventually died a very unpleasant death, basically died of a broken heart after it. So this sonata is supposed to depict her emotions when she finds herself abandoned by Aeneas. There are 3 movements. The first movement is probably the most expressive of the 3, and I feel it veers between her desperation at being abandoned, a little bit of memories, of fond memories, and sometimes sadness, sometimes anger. The second movement, you really see her getting very, I don't know how to say it. She's quite mad by the second movement. It's full of drama and it just races through. And then the third movement just seals it off in a slightly lighter way. Okay, so this is Didone Abbandonata. It's Dido who's been abandoned. Let's switch that off.
three? Oh. Thank you. We move a little further forward in history. With Mozart, his Piano Sonata number 12, he wrote 3 sonatas which were published in 1784. And we think he may have written them the year before when he was on a visit to Salzburg in order to make the for his father to make the acquaintance of his new wife. I would love to have been a fly on the wall because Mozart and his father did not get on, and his father had opposed the marriage for a long time and finally gave in. So I don't know quite what the reception of Constance was, but she was a good wife and it was a good marriage, but not because of father-in-law. Anyway, this sonata is in 3 movements, a classical first movement of sonata form, which is very melodic in character. An adagio in the second movement is in B-flat major and is very elaborately ornamented in a sonatina form. And then the last movement is a rollicking virtuoso allegro in 6/8 time, with lots of contrast in dynamics and character, finishing unexpectedly quietly, given the contrast with the flashy opening of the movement. So, Mozart's Sonata number 12 in F. They're terrible at getting back into it.
I would like to ask you please to return to your seats. If there are any supporters of Irish rugby, please shut your ears for a moment. It's approaching half-time in the quarter-final and the score is Ireland 10, New Zealand 18. Thank you for returning to your seats.
Gerald was ahead of his time, computer-wise, everything's...
And now for something completely different. Liszt, I think it's fair to say, it's no exaggeration to say that Liszt was a bit obsessed about death. He was obsessed about it theologically and philosophically and emotionally and socially and familiarly even. Sadly, 2 of his 3 children died when they were young. And he wrote lots of music which had death in the background, if not in the foreground. And a couple of other pieces, piano pieces, for instance, like Totentanz and Pensée des Morts, were, again, absolutely focused on the subject. And Funerailles is one of his darkest and most tragic compositions. It was subtitled October 1849 because it was written as an elegy in memory of the many Hungarians who were killed in their uprising against the Habsburg rule. People didn't quite realize that this was why he had written it, because Chopin died the same month in which he wrote this piece, and they thought that this was a response to Chopin's death, which it wasn't. It was actually about something much bigger. It's a massively dramatic work. The opening notes sound like funeral bells, and it gradually builds a big wash of sound, and then suddenly it cuts out, and he loves these enormous silences when you're waiting for something to happen, and then you get this sad, plaintive moment, and then you're back. And the majority of the piece is actually a funeral march, which gradually builds and builds, and he uses a huge amount of pedal, of sustaining pedal, so you get this wash of sound, and that way I hope to avoid, I hope you won't notice the notes that go astray. So, LISZT's Funerailles.
I have to say, as a violinist, there's a lot of us around. There's not many pianists around that you get to play with, so it's an absolute privilege to have someone of the quality of David. We've been playing together for the best part of 30 years now, one way or another, we've realised. The point when I noticed that the most was when I played the first movement of the Tartini without my glasses on. And that's a gag that David used to pull every time we did a concert. We used to get the end to the first movement of the first piece and he'd have to leave and put his other glasses on. So now I do that. We're going to finish off with Beethoven's sonata for, I think probably published as a sonata for piano and violin. So he carries on in a tradition that had been started by the likes of Mozart, where the pieces were conceived as pieces for the piano with violin accompaniment. By this stage, I think they're much more equal, but it is very much, it's not a piece, the Tartini earlier was a violin piece that had an accompaniment, this is very much a duo. It's known as the Spring Sonata, but I've discovered that actually that title was given to it after Beethoven died. It wasn't what he had in mind when he composed it, which quite surprised me because it feels very spring-like. It's in the key of F major, which was the key that he chose for the Pastoral Symphony, so it's a key that is often associated with music depicting nature. I definitely was finding birdsong in the slow movements until I discovered that he didn't have spring in mind necessarily at all when he composed it. It's in 4 movements. The third movement is a scherzo, and I was listening to Record Review this morning with different performances of Beethoven's 8th Symphony, and it was very striking how there was a time when we always thought of Beethoven having a constant frown, very, very serious. And actually, he isn't always totally serious. And there's some of the performances that they played, the more recent interpretations had much more of a sort of smile and joy about them for the 8th Symphony that they were playing. The third movement of this shows Beethoven having one of his humorous moments in this. It's a scherzo, which means a joke. I think the joke is that we're supposed to sound like we're not quite together. So there is this little motif, and bits of it we're a beat out from each other. And I certainly remember as a teenager learning a piano sonata that Beethoven wrote that was purposely made you sound like you weren't getting your hands together. And apparently he'd written that to sort of gently poke fun at, I think, amateur pianists who couldn't get their hands down sort of in time with each other. So this will be Beethoven's Sonata number 5, often known as the Spring Sonata. It's in 4 movements. I hope you enjoy. I'll switch the mic off, shall I? We do have one more piece up our sleeve. Would you like us to play for you? So it's a nocturne by a French composer called Lily Boulanger. And there were two sisters, Nadia and Lily Boulanger, around the turn of the 20th century who taught at the Paris Conservatoire and taught many of the famous figures of the 20th century, both French composers and beyond. And this nocturne was composed by Lily, and it's a piece about the nighttime, and it's scored either for violin or for flutes, but we think it works rather nicely with flute and piano. I hear lots of resonances of pieces that Ravel wrote later on for the same combination, so I hope you enjoy.
thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you'll give generously to our appeal for to the Scott unit. I'd be very grateful for your gifts. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Catherine and to David for entertaining us this evening in such a marvellous way. I know that your prolonged applause was a genuine signal of your appreciation for them. Thank you very much. David has reminded us to give generously, and I'll remind you about how you can do so in a minute. First of all, the property team have asked me to tell you that the lights at the west end of the church have failed. Therefore, please leave the church by the door to my right, straight into the car park that way, and make sure that you go home by municipally lit streets, hopefully. But please don't go out through the back because the lights have failed. So just to remind you, there will be people taking up your offerings at the door. You can give either by cash or by credit card, or by scanning the QR code and giving online that way. Thank you very, very much once again for coming to this evening's concert.
Oh, it's lovely to see you.